Hey everyone, welcome to the next installment in the How to Be a Poser Beginner series. As a supplement to any instructions that might come with your 6-scale figure, we're going to use this video to highlight a few techniques that you might want to implement to determine your figure's range of motion and articulation. Let's get started. Okay, so you've just taken your first look at your figure and you've inspected it to make sure that all the pieces are here. None of them have been damaged. There's no damage to the figure itself. Everything is good to go. The next step in the process is to determine what the body itself can do so that you can start posing it. Now, we're going to talk about two things here. One is articulation and the other is range of motion. While the two are related, they are in fact two entirely different animals. Articulation refers to different points at which the body itself can move. And to help you to illustrate that, we've provided basically what you're looking at here, which is the body upon which this Deadpool figure is built. Now, you can see here all these different points right here where the body's broken, all these different joints. Each one of those represents a point of articulation. And for instance, this here, the twisting of the fist, that is a point of articulation. Taking the fist and moving it up or down, that is another point of articulation. There's another point of articulation here at the elbow. There are several up here at the shoulder, one where you rotate the upper arm, one where you can raise it and lower it, another where you can swivel it, and another still that you can't see on the inside. It's engineered so that you can actually shrug his shoulders. So yeah, it's really a remarkable bit of engineering there. So that represents articulation. Now, when we're talking about range of motion, that actually talks about the limits of the figure's ability to move in a specific way. So for example, with the elbow, we're talking about the range of motion from fully extended to how far you can contract the arm. In this case, it's a bit more than 90 degrees. Given the type of arm that we're talking about here, that's actually really, really solid. Oh, look at that. It's quite a bit more because it's double jointed. This elbow actually has two completely distinct points of articulation, allowing it to contract even further. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the collisions or the interference that may occur because of a costume or accessories that might limit the range of motion of a figure at a particular point of articulation. For instance, if you take a look at this figure, this nude figure, the way that it's able to bend its arm through those double joints and get it that far up, because of the fabric bunching up here, you're going to run into an issue where you're not able to get that same range of motion. You see the difference there? There's a marked difference in range of motion, and it's limited by the fabric, which is bunching up here, but it's also growing tight here on the outside. That's to be expected. This is just going to happen. It's just the way of things when you're talking about downscaling. The fabrics are naturally not going to be as flexible as they are in, say, the full human scale. Okay, so before we actually begin testing the range of motion on this particular figure, I just want to make a note here about joint manipulation in general. And this is probably one of the biggest favors I'll be able to do for you. When you're bending a joint, any joint, you want to make sure that you grip both parts of the joint as close to the point of articulation as possible and bend it in this way, for instance. The reason for that is the further out that you go away from the joint itself, from the point of articulation, the more leverage you create and the more pressure you're putting on the joint itself. So if this joint was, say, uncommonly stiff for whatever reason, you might apply so much pressure that you wind up breaking the joint. By moving your fingers closer to the joint itself, you're minimizing that leverage and also minimizing the possibility that you might wind up breaking your figure. This application is universal. You need to be thinking about this with knee joints. There's quite a bit of engineering going on in the shoulder joints, especially with this figure. So that just presents more opportunities to break something if you're not careful. So just to sum up, no matter where the joint is, whether it's on the head, shoulder, elbows, any of these points of articulation, just make sure that you keep your fingers as close together while manipulating that joint as possible, as close to the point of articulation as you can, just to make sure that you don't wind up breaking anything. Okay, now that we've established our terms and everybody has a clear idea in their head what the difference is between range of motion and articulation, it's time to put those things to the test using the figure itself. So, get your figure out and just start gently working. And you can see that I'm using a different method here. I'm not bedding the figure with two hands. I'm using one hand, kind of putting one finger into the crook of the arm and then bracing with my thumb and middle finger here and then bending it that way. That's another acceptable way to do it. But if you're just beginning this for your first time, probably best to do the two-handed method. So just gradually move that arm and just find out how far you can go with that. And again, it's a little bit more than halfway in this particular case. Other figures will be able to go further, others not quite so far. Do it with as many of the joints as you feel comfortable with. Any motion that you actually think you might want to replicate while you're posing the figure yourself, just test it and see what its limitations are. When you feel resistance, probably best to err on the side of caution and stop. We've got some really solid range of motion on this figure, even with the costume and the upper torso. Let's twist it just to be sure of that. And you can see that that's actually pushing slightly more than 45 degrees before I even start to feel any resistance. So that's really solid. Again, just as with the arms, some figures will do better, some will not perform quite so well. Okay, so now that we've got the torso, let's check the legs. Now, as I'm moving this around, there's a little magnet there. Get that fixed. Now, as I'm moving this forward and I'm noticing the resistance that begins to occur, two things. You'll notice that it's colliding here with that pouch, and that's fine. But the resistance is caused by the suit tightening back here. And yeah, I'm just not comfortable with pushing that any further, so I'm going to bring it back down. We know now what that will do. Now let's try the knees. Okay, I've got a good 90 degrees range of motion there. That's pretty good. Couple that with a little bit of a forward thing there, so you can do something cool like propping the figure's foot up onto, if you had like a 6-scale crate that you could use. You know, just get creative with it, but we'll discuss that later. So now I've got a pretty good idea of what the figure can and can't do. I don't normally recommend that anybody go much beyond shoulder width when it comes to a wider stance, but we're checking here right now and this figure can more than accommodate that. You can go much wider if you wanted to, but that can be kind of unattractive unless you're doing like a high kick. In fact, why not just find out if we can do that? You can kind of do a medium kick, maybe a side kick with this figure. Let's kind of twist the torso this way. Yeah, maybe not so much. So let's push that back down. So again, I had an idea. I decided I wanted to explore the potential for it. And then when I tested the range of motion of the figure, it turns out that it couldn't do it in a way that I would find attractive. And that's the purpose of testing your range of motion. You just want to know what you can do and what you don't want to do. Okay, one last thing that I want to test before we're done for the day with the range of motion test is the head and the neck. You can see that you can get quite a bit of motion out of this head. If you take the head off, you can see that it's on a double jointed neck. So this part that rests in the head swivels just as a head would, so you have this particular motion that's created by that. And then to get the head to jut out or to pull back, the lower ball joint down below will enable you to do that. And I think actually this neck seems to be triple jointed. So that further enables you to get the head to look down. Using this joint down here, there's another joint here, and then of course this joint up at the top. So 3 joints, and that's some pretty significant range of motion that you can replicate with that. Seeing here, I've got that first joint at the bottom pushed forward all the way, further pushed forward with the second joint, and now tilting down with that head. So this revelation of a triple jointed neck is one of the reasons why you want to test the range of motion of the figure. If I hadn't just looked at that, then I would not have been aware of the fact that I had that opportunity. So, what can we do with this head? The answer is a lot. And that's going to give me confidence going into the next segment, which is posing, which is what we've all been waiting for. So stay tuned. We'll be bringing that up to you next.
Hey, did you like that video? Be sure to subscribe by clicking the S icon on your screen and click that bell icon to be notified whenever a new video is posted. If you'd like more info on the items featured in this video, click the link provided under Product Info. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to let your geek side show.